Hello, my name is Judy. Welcome to the Liberated Multitasker. Today we're going to be making and canning chicken bone broth. In this pot, I'm putting the bones of 4 whole chickens. I'm going to add 8 cups of vegetables. These are onions, celery, carrots, garlic. Next, I will be adding 2 tablespoons of whole black peppercorns. I'll also be adding some bay leaves, 4 to 6 depending on the size of the leaves. I will also be adding some Redmond's real salt. Now, a half a cup of apple cider vinegar. And I'm going to add about 4 gallons of water. This is an 18-quart slow cooker, and so I'm just going to fill it up to the rim. And it takes right at 4 gallons. I'm going to add the lid, and I'm going to cut it on to about 250 degrees. And I can forget about it. 4 hours later, I'm giving it a stir, just checking on it, wanting to make sure the liquid's not going to spill out because I filled it pretty full. 12 hours later, still checking on it, just stirring it around. And 20 hours later, done. I'm going to use this strainer and this mixing bowl. And I'm going to scoop out the bones and the vegetables out from the broth. Now, I put this chicken broth on to cook Friday at 11 a.m. and I cut it off Saturday morning at 7 a.m. So it cooked for 20 hours straight. I'm almost done. As you can see, my mixing bowl is very full. And I'm just going to put that to the side. That's a 12-quart stock pot. I will also end up using an 8-quart stock pot. That's a fine mesh strainer with cheesecloth and a milk nut bag. I'm trying to do the straining in a one-step process instead of straining it twice. Now I'll use a ladle and this fat separator, and I'm using this so that I don't have to refrigerate my broth before I start to can. Normally you would refrigerate it, you would take that top layer of solidified fat off, warm it back up, and then can it. And with me using the fat separator, I can keep the fat or most of the fat out of the broth so I can go ahead and begin the canning process. So I found this just an easier way to go ahead and knock it out. I don't always have room in my refrigerator for 2 large pots of broth. When I usually make the chicken broth, I do a huge batch and then I'm kind of done. You can see that fat line. So that fat I do not put in the broth. I will put it in the mixing bowl of bones and vegetables. Now I'm about to show you what's left after you finish straining. The milk nut bag caught most all of what you don't want in your broth, and the cheesecloth was fairly clean. So there's my 2 pots of broth ready to can. Here's my American 921 pressure canner. I have the rack in the bottom and 2 to 3 inches of water. I'm using pints. I have clean jars, and I'm just going to fill those up. This canner, I was able to get in 17 pints double stacked for the first canning. It takes me 2 canning cycles in order to get all this broth canned. Chicken bone broth is such a wonderful thing to have on the shelf, and it's fairly inexpensive to make, especially since you're using things people would normally throw away, bones or skin or vegetable scraps. I like to use bone broth when I'm cooking soups or stews or rice. You can use it in any number of ways. And if you're feeling sick, Heat up a can of this, add a touch of salt to taste, and drink it. It's a wonderful thing to have on hand, and it's cheaper than buying it from the store. I'm actually making this broth from the rotisserie chickens that I purchased at Sam's. If you recall my food prep video, these are the bones from those chickens. So I'm almost done. Now you need 1 inch head space. So I'm measuring each jar. I have a little too much liquid, and so I'm pulling out enough liquid so it leaves me with 1 inch head space. Just about done. And then I'm going to need to clean the rim of my jars. And I'm going to use just a bowl of vinegar just to wipe those jars so there's no fat on the edges to hinder any seal. Now to put my lids on. These lids have been cleaned and we're just sitting in some hot water. Not many more left. And then we'll be adding on the bands. Now I normally put my finger on the center of the lid as I screw the band on. You just want to do fingertip tight. Now we're just about done, and then it'll be time to load the canner. I have warm water in the canner, and my broth is warm, not even hot. Just a few more. I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a second. If I'm not mistaken, I'm able to get 9 on the bottom. And then I add my second rack. And then I'm able to get 8 more on top. Now to put the lid on my canner. There's an arrow showing me where to line it up. And then I just screw the knobs on. I always do the knobs at opposite ends at the same time just to help level the lid. Now on my stove, I end up using medium-low heat. Just double checking those knobs. And you can see this is where the arrow tells you to line it up at. Now here you see it venting steam. It needs to vent steam for a solid 10 minutes. Now depending on your sea level determines the pound of pressure you need to use. For my area, it's 10 pounds of pressure. Check your manual to find out what you need. Now once the weight begins to jiggle and it maintains 11 pounds of pressure, you begin your processing time. And for pints, according to the recipe, it's 20 minutes. When your 20 minutes is up, you cut your oven off, and when it's down to 0 pressure, you can remove your weight. But don't take your lid off yet. It still needs to cool. So I still give it another 10 or 15 minutes before I take the lid off. Then another 10 or 15 minutes before I remove my jars, just to help it not to siphon. After 2 canning sessions, I end up with 27 sealed pints of chicken bone broth. Isn't that gorgeous? Liquid gold. Wonderful to have. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I hope to see you soon.